Hey everyone, this is Katrina. This is the Kickin podcast, and here I have with me wrestler Chris Barton. How are you today?
I'm good. I'm good. How are you doing today?
Hanging in there, hanging in there. So I wanted to start this off like, let's say you're talking to somebody who has never seen you wrestle before. How would you describe who you are as a wrestler, and how would you describe your gimmick?
I'd like to describe myself as someone who likes to have a good time, but someone you don't really want to mess with at the same time. You know what I mean? There's a time and a place to have a good time,
Uh-huh.
and then there's just a moment where I'm just suplexing you all the way across the ring, basically. So if you like watching people get tossed around, hit in the face, I'm the guy to watch, man.
I actually was very fortunate to see you. I lost my show this year, which was in March at it was I think Elks Lodge in Queens, which was a pretty really
Yes, I
dope
think it
show.
was
So I got to see you
right
there,
before
and
COVID.
so I was like kind of sad. I was telling people that if I knew that was gonna be my last wrestling show for a while, I probably would have stayed a lot longer afterwards. But I think you're a great wrestler. So whoever have it, check him out definitely. So what got you started into wrestling? Like, what was that aha moment for you when you was just like, you know what, I want to wrestle?
So I've been into pro wrestling my entire life, as long as I remember. When I was a baby, like my father was into wrestling and stuff like that. I remember watching with him. The moment I knew that this was what I was gonna do, I'd say probably when I was around middle school.
Uh-huh.
I want to say I was on the wrestling team, and I was like, if I can do this, I could probably like wrestle for real. You know
Uh-huh.
what I mean? I didn't actually commit to that decision until I was actually 14 years old when I started pro wrestling training at the Ludus Wrestling Academy
Uh-huh.
way back in like 2014, 2014 it was.
Nice, nice. Well, my school was like such a small high school, so we didn't have wrestling. Like we had like basketball and track and stuff. So I always find it interesting that people is like they actually had wrestling in their high schools because I was like my school definitely didn't have anything to that like magnitude of like sports and stuff. So that's
Yeah,
pretty dope.
it was weird because like my middle school had wrestling, we had judo, we had like everything. My high school had my first high school had wrestling and a bunch of other sports like that. But when I went to my second high school, they had every sport, even swimming, but they didn't have wrestling. So I was like, well, that sucks.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'm always like really because I liked wrestling. I want to say since I was like Shawn Michaels was the person that got me into wrestling, and then like I got obsessive with it when I like the Hardy Boys like made the debut, and I was like, okay, these guys are amazing. And then it was like I've been an on and off kind of relationship with it throughout the years, so I never really knew anybody like in person that had wrestling. Like they was like, no, this is like school had this, or it was usually like they had to find their like a wrestling school when they became old enough to do so. So that's pretty
Yeah.
dope. It's pretty dope.
Mhm.
Who would you say has like the greatest influence on your like wrestling career? Like somebody used like this person influenced me.
Uh, I'm influenced. Like, if you're talking about wrestling itself, like that got me into it. I'd
Hmm.
say some of my biggest influences had to be like Eddie Guerrero,
Nice.
Chris. Like, growing up, like SmackDown was the show we watched, because we didn't have cable and stuff like that. So we
Uh-huh.
just had UPN. So like we would just watch like the SmackDown six, like Rey Mysterio, Edge, Eddie Guerrero. Like those were the guys that got me into wrestling when I was a kid. And obviously, the older I got, widening my horizons, I took influence from guys like Kenta Kobashi,
Uh-huh.
Taz, Gary Albright. Like, there's so many influences to me that help mold my love for wrestling
Uh-huh.
as a fan, and then my love for wrestling as an active wrestler as well.
Nice. And out of those, would you say any of those that you mentioned would be like a favorite wrestler of yours? Were they just like, oh, I like them much, or would you call like you was like a diehard type of fan for them?
It's really hard. I mean, I love all those guys I just listed. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
It's hard to map out a favorite, like one favorite,
Uh-huh.
like wrestler. It's really difficult. If I have to pick three, it'd probably be Kenta Kobashi, Eddie Guerrero, and Chris Jericho.
Nice. I mean, I loved Eddie growing up too, but I felt like I appreciated him a lot more as an adult, like the things he could do in the ring. And
Hmm.
then his like his characters that he usually had, especially the whole Latino Heat character. I love that character so much because it was just like he embodied that. So I always tell people like he's actually one of the greatest wrestlers I've probably ever seen. And I'm glad that most people kind of agree to that extent. Like, he was one of the greatest to ever step inside a ring. So that's pretty cool.
I feel like I gravitated a lot towards him because being Hispanic and watching someone of Hispanic heritage become successful in pro wrestling, like that to me was amazing. And he was also my dad's favorite wrestler, so obviously when he was on, it was getting into it with my father and stuff like that as a kid.
Yeah, that's pretty dope. What would you say, like, if you can work with somebody and it's like your dream tag team partner, or like if you was like had a stable of wrestlers and you had like complete control of who to have in your stable, who would be your tag team partner and who would you have in your stable? It could be any wrestler.
Well, I'm actually in a tag team, and my tag team partner is actually Dominic Nero. If I had to pick a stable, I'd map it to 4 people. I just have myself, Dominic De Niro, my boy Tristan Ty, and Gabriel Sky in the group as well. Those are my best friends outside the ring and inside the ring.
Nice.
And I just feel like we're the perfect stable because we're all just we all bring something different to the table. You know what I mean? Like, I'm the big guy, big suplexes, flipping people across the ring. Dominic De Niro's hard hitting. He's gonna, knock somebody out. Tristan Ty is just so smooth in what he does, his transitioning. Like, he has so much finesse. And then you have the high flyer and Gabriel Sky. I feel like this is that perfect, group, in my opinion.
Nice. I actually seen all of you guys wrestle, so that's pretty cool. Like, you mentioned other days, so I'm like, okay, I know these guys. That's cool. Who would you say, because you mentioned them, so now I would ask, what you mentioned that as far as them being like your closest friends, how would you describe, like, is it easier being friends with somebody where you wrestling, or do you find it harder because you guys might be a little more tougher on each other because you guys are so close friends?
I feel like when you have a friendship in wrestling, it's a little bit of a unique kind of friendship because on one hand you support each other, you have nothing but love for each other, but then on the other hand, I don't want to say you're competing, but you're also kind of like trying to get these opportunities as well. And like, one person cannot get an opportunity and the other person won't, and vice versa. So something like that could lead to tension, something like that could lead to conflict. But honestly, like, I don't think we have any of those problems. Like, we're super supportive towards each other. You know what I mean? When Tristan got signed to MLW, we were nothing but supportive to him. Every single big opportunity any of us have gotten, we've all been very, very supportive to each other. So honestly, I think we'll be good. I think we're fine.
Okay, nice. Would you say that you had any make any sacrifices to be a wrestler, or in wrestling in general? Did you have sacrifices, and what were those sacrifices that you had to make to do what you love to do?
I think the biggest sacrifice for me took place a lot during when I was still in school. So a lot of it was like missing prom, missing school days, missing trips, missing like relationships with people and stuff like that. Like, that was a lot of things I had to sacrifice time. My body's obviously a big sacrifice as well that we have to make. So those are a lot of sacrifices I made then. As an adult now, working with a job and stuff like that, sacrificing work days, sacrificing money and time and energy is, I think, the biggest sacrifice now.
Okay. And would you say, like, what are the pros and cons of, like, I know most wrestlers, especially in the indie circuit, have to travel to get to show to, let people know who they are in the ring. What would you say is the biggest pros and cons out of being a wrestler when it comes to traveling and stuff?
The biggest pros and cons, I think I'll start with the cons first. There's a possibility of possibly getting sick. You're traveling to different states, traveling to different countries. There is that possibility of getting sick. There's that possibility of getting lost, possibility of getting into some trouble and stuff like that. Laws in other states are different. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like something that flies over here, you go to another state, it won't fly over there. So there are those cons. But there's a lot of pros in my opinion. The pros of traveling, when it comes to the wrestling itself, you're wrestling in front of a different audience who, is may have a different taste of wrestling. You know what I mean? Like, when me and De Niro traveled to Alabama,
Uh-huh.
a lot of that fan base is more like they don't really care about the moves. They don't really care about, the spots or whatever. They mostly care about the characters and, having a good time, having a good laugh, being invested. Like that's what they care about. You know what I mean? So it's kind of, as a wrestler, you kind of grow more and more, and you learn adaptability.
Uh-huh.
And exactly.
Okay, it's pretty
um,
cool.
yeah.
What are your thoughts on the current state of wrestling? Like I've heard many people's like their thought as far as like WWE had like a monopoly on the wrestling market for a while, but then we also have like New Japan, we have AEW now, there's still Ring of Honor, there's MLW, there's so many, and then of course there's all the indie shows, which I always love going to because I feel like it's more of a home feel. Like this is nothing against like going to like bigger shows because obviously, if you're with a good group of people, it's always like cool. But when you go to like an indie show, it's like such a different vibe. So what are your thoughts on like the current state of wrestling currently?
So before the pandemic happened, I thought pro wrestling was in the best state possible. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like for years, it's kind of just been it was WWE, and then there was like smaller indie companies. But as of the past maybe 5-10 years, more and more companies have started to rise. Like you have WWE, you have AEW, you have Impact, you have MLW that came back, you have New
Yeah.
Japan, you have AAA, you have OWE. Like you have all these companies who, and it just gives more opportunities for people. Like my goal is Japan. That's been my goal since I was 10 years old, was to wrestle in Japan. And there's so many companies in Japan to wrestle now,
Uh-huh.
as opposed to before where there wasn't that many. And wrestling now, like it's a bigger platform now because there's YouTube now. Back in the day, like YouTube wasn't really as prevalent as it is now. You
Yeah.
have YouTube, you have Twitch, you have all these platforms in which you could watch wrestling. Like wrestling's everywhere now. Every state and town you go to, there's most likely going to be an independent wrestling show. And to bring up your point about independent wrestling, I love independent wrestling. It's more up close in your face. It's a more intimate setting, more
Yeah.
intimate feel to it. You know what I mean? So I feel like a lot more people could gravitate towards indie wrestling. And for people who don't know or watch indie wrestling, it's simply because they haven't been to a show. I know people who, never went to an indie show, finally went to one, and now they're there every single month. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think honestly, indie wrestling, people just gotta, give it a try. Go to a local show in your town. You know what I mean? And you'll probably have a really good time.
Yeah, that's literally how it started with me. Like a friend of mine like 2 years ago was like, yeah, go to come House of Glory is about 20 minutes away from where I live. So she's like, yeah, this is back close to you. Just come check it out. I'm like, okay, I don't know, but fine, we'll go. And then like, after that, it was like a wrap. I was like, okay, so like I need more shows to go to. And then it was like after a while, I was just like, let's go find these shows. Then I wound up going to Jersey, and it's just like I always just feel like the vibe. Like I love indie wrestling because like I feel like the wrestlers feel like they want to make sure the fans are entertained, if that's the right way I want to word it. There's like they're just so more into like letting us see whatever they can do. And I feel like sometimes indie wrestling gets a bad rap because or anybody assumes like anybody can just get in a wrestling ring. And I'm like, well, I can't wrestle. I can't. I would never try to wrestle. I don't have that type of stamina for that, or the balls, rather, if I want to use the right, if that's the word I want to use, to just
Yeah.
like get in the ring, take a bump, like that kind of thing. And I was like, you guys don't even realize the amount of work indie wrestlers put in to like travel and get their, how to get us to see what their gimmick is or what their persona is. It's like that's a lot of work. So I always like overly admire indie wrestlers because it's like after a while you start seeing them in a lot of places. You're like, oh, I know this person. I can't wait to see this person. You just get like so excited about it. So I definitely agree with your points about that.
Yeah, it's
What?
cool. It's cool because you kind of
Uh-huh.
see people who. I'm sorry to cut you off, but you kind of see people who, you've seen in the indies like make their way up, to bigger companies, and it's kind of cool because like, oh, like I know that person when they were wrestling at the Elks Lodge, way back when.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on gimmick matches? And if you like them, what is your favorite type of gimmick match?
Gimmick matches. So That's a good one. One of my favorite gimmick matches, if done right, the ladder match.
Nice.
Ladder matches are super entertaining. A cage match can be really good too. Like I like this kind of old school ones, like just a ladder match, cage match. If done right with the right angle, with the right rivalry, you know, I think it could go well. Uh, yeah, I guess those have to be my two favorite ones.
Okay, so now I'm gonna reverse that. What is your least favorite gimmick match?
Would you consider a death match a gimmick match?
Yes, I would actually.
Um, not that I hate deathmatch wrestling. I
Hmm.
respect it. I believe, it is an art form in on itself. But to me, like it's just not something I would do. I
Uh-huh.
don't see I don't see deathmatch wrestling having not the art itself, but the people doing it having a lot of longevity
Uh-huh.
because of like the toll it takes on your body, like the scars and the possible injuries you can get, and it's just I don't know. Like from that kind of standpoint and from a visual standpoint, a lot of death matches aren't as creative as before, I guess. I guess everything's kind of been done already too. I mean, if they find some sort of creative, way to have a death match, then, cool. But it's just not my cup of tea, to be honest.
Yeah, I was just talking to a wrestler a few days ago about that, and I was like, I like them, but I can't watch too many of them because then I'm like, oh my god, this person's hurt, and then like my mind, I can't like suspend myself anymore to like, I know it might be a storyline, but like I'm like, oh my god, this person's hurt, and then I just can't like turn that off after a while. So I have to watch that very like scarcely, like I can't watch it all the time. So I definitely understand that. What are your thoughts on like sometimes the public, a lot of the public or wrestling fans rather have very opinionated thoughts about wrestlers and what's like not real. So what are your thoughts on when people are like, oh my God, wrestling's fake and they're not really doing anything? What are your thoughts? Because I always like try not to argue with people and I'm like, listen, even if it's storyline's fake, they still gotta wrestle, they can still get injured. That's very real. So after a while I kind of had like the chill argument with people because I'm just like, all right, you guys are getting on my nerves. But what are your thoughts when people say stuff like that when it's like, oh my god, that's not a real job, or oh, this is so fake, even though most wrestlers have the story of like you got to make sure you take care of yourself and you don't get injured. So what are your thoughts on people say stuff like that?
So I look at people who say that and who say wrestling's fake, and usually my next question I ask is, how is it fake? Because if people say, oh, it's scripted and it's work, they don't really hate each other,
Yeah.
then you ask yourself, okay, well, look at MMA. You know what I mean? Like you don't think there's fights that are fixed? Boxing, you don't think fights are fixed? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then sometimes the next argument could be, oh, but the hits aren't real. I'd be like, have you watched any Japanese wrestling? Have you watched guys like, Chris Dickinson, Low Key, like any of these guys who legitimately, you know, beat the crap out of you in the ring?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And like anything and everything can happen in wrestling. I don't see wrestling. Like, people argue it's fixed and it's scripted, but literally anything can happen. There's people who've died in the ring. That wasn't part of the script.
Yes.
I mean? People have died in the ring. Someone could get hurt. Someone could actually pin the wrong person. Like everything and anything could happen in a wrestling ring. So to say that something is like scripted or whatever, and to use that as an excuse to label what we do as fake, to
Yeah.
me is stupid. Like when I get out of a training session, my body's sore. So sometimes I could barely walk. Sometimes after a match, like I just have to lay down because I can't stand up. You know what I mean? Like if this
Hmm.
was fake, wouldn't you think everyone would do it? Especially if it's such a big market and people could become millionaires from it. And if it were so easy and fake, wouldn't everyone try to do it?
Those are great points. You said that. said that a lot nicer now. I would say it sometimes. I'm just like, guys, like, can you do this? Can you like run the rope, or can you flip off the rope, or take that bump or get hit? Whatever it is that wrestlers do for their gimmick, it's just like I always think it's just ridiculous. I'm like, if you can't do it, then you probably should be quiet about it and not have it. Like, you can have an opinion if you're like constructively criticizing something, like, oh, this maybe can be tweaked if you're paying for something. That I can kind of understand. But I just, really dislike when people get to like that level of like bad mouthing wrestlers when I'm like, but they're doing stuff not only to entertain us, but like, you can't do it because I can't do it. Like, most of us cannot do what they do. So just be like, more respectful. It's like that entitlement type some of them have. And I really
Yeah.
dislike that sometimes. What would you say, like, if you wasn't wrestling and you had any dream job that wasn't wrestling, what would be the next job that you would like to do that wasn't wrestling?
Booking wrestling.
Nice.
Um, I don't know. I feel like I have ideas.
Uh-huh.
I always tell other people. I feel like I have better ideas for other people than I do myself. So I feel like if I wasn't wrestling, or if I wasn't like, if I just physically couldn't do it, I'd probably either try to book wrestling or I do commentary. Those would be the two biggest things I'd probably do.
That's pretty dope. I think you have a nice voice for commentary. Like, I can see it. Like,
thank you.
So, what would you say? Like, have you ever gotten to a point where I know sometimes wrestlers get, or just people in general, no matter what the career, sometimes you get to the point where, like, maybe you question if you should be doing this, or like, does it get for you exhausting? Like, even before COVID, I know COVID kind of changed a lot of things this year and slowed so much things down. But before COVID, like, did you ever get tired of like traveling? Did you ever get tired of wrestling? Did you ever question, is this something I wanted to do?
Yeah, of course. Like I've questioned if what I'm doing is worth it for a long time. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
It could happen as soon as, like, if I have a bad match and it's like, oh man, like, do I really deserve to be here? Should I even be here? Like, is it
Uh-huh.
worth it? You know what I mean? Like, every wrestler gets those thoughts. Every wrestler gets like that sense of doubt and that sense of, like, should I not be doing this? You know what I mean? I
Mm-hmm.
guarantee every wrestler you ask, you know what I mean, they will tell you they've had some sort of self doubt or some sort of, self questioning, and if they don't, then they're full of crap, because even the strongest people I know have questioned whether or not they should be in this business or not.
Okay. I like that answer. I think I do agree. I think most people, if even if you love doing something, there are days that you're just like, okay, this is not a good day. I'm a writer, so a lot of times, like this year, I really was struggling with my writing, like if I even want to write anymore. But 2020 has been a very strange year, and I think a part of it is just the fact that this has been a very crazy year in general for most people. It's like I'm hoping 2021 comes back better with vengeance, and everybody can get like in a good space and good vibes and everything. So I definitely understand that. Um, if there's any person you can work with in any capacity, who would you work with?
Ooh, it's hard to narrow it down to just one. A lot of the people I would play my dream matches, a lot of them either retired or dead. Um, the one person alive from that list
Mm-hmm.
is Chris Hero.
Nice.
He was Cassius Ohno in WWE. Chris Hero to me was like one of the first indie guys I got into. I got into Ring of Honor
Mm-hmm.
in like 2007. So like it was him and Claudio Castagnoli, better known as Cesaro to most people, were like some of the first like indie guys I like watched. So Chris Hero to me was always someone I wanted to like have a match with, because I just love his style. I love you know the the mix of strong style with
Mm-hmm.
the flexibility and athleticism. Like, to me, like, that's someone I would love to have a match with.
Nice. I actually know who that was, so that's pretty dope. Um, if you can, I think one of the best parts of wrestlers outside of the gimmick is their finisher move. So, what is your finisher move, and why did you pick that as your finisher move?
I could tell you a funny story with it. So my finisher is the Barton Death Driver. So if
Mm-hmm.
I were to explain it to some people, when you look at a Michinoku driver, which is basically almost like you're lifting them up for body slam, and then you're dropping them on their head, and you're sitting down. It's that in reverse. So instead of like their back is towards me, I'm lifting them up in the air. They're upside down, and I'm driving them, to their face. That's the Barton Death Driver. The way that move kind of came about was one day I was just, I think it was a Dojo Wars I was doing, and before
Mm-hmm.
that I was kind of just like, I mean, I'm gonna pull back the curtain a little bit here, because why not? I was supposed to wrestle Jordan Oliver and Ellis Taylor from Young, Dumb, and Broke, and it was
Yeah.
supposed to be me and my boy Gabe wrestling them. And I was kind of like, I kind of want to do something new, you know what I mean? And I was kind of just like, Jordan pitched like a reverse body slam, and I was like, okay, well, what if we do that with like I sit out with it or something. And then he was like, okay, cool. So the match happened. We get to that time, and I did it. Didn't look the cleanest, but I did it. And then ever since then, I was like, okay, I'm gonna make this my move, basically.
Uh-huh.
And ever since that day, that's been my move. That I do almost every match I'm in. No one's ever kicked out of the Barton Death Driver. So yeah.
That's pretty dope. I always like the cool finishing moves. So, like, oh my god, I want to see this again. So that's pretty dope. What would you say was your favorite match you've ever did of all time so far? And then also, what is your favorite match from any other wrestler that you have seen?
Ooh, so if the cards are played right, my favorite match might happen next weekend. But I'm not gonna talk about that. But
Okay.
matches happened already. I have to narrow it down to three because me and my tag partner De Niro against the Ugly Ducklings was good. Us two against Adrenaline Express, VSK and EJ Risk was good. And for a singles capacity, my match against Jordan Oliver was had to be one of my favorite matches.
Okay, that's pretty dope. And who would you
And
say?
then someone else, I forgot. I'm sorry.
No worries.
That's someone else's favorite match. My favorite match is someone else's. Uh, hmm. That's another hard one. I guess the one that comes to the top of my head is Kenta Kobashi, Stan Hansen, Tokyo Dome, January 4th, 1992.
Nice. Nice. I haven't seen it, so I'm gonna have to look that up so I can see what you're talking about. I like Japanese wrestling too, but I feel like I'm more new. I literally just found out about Japanese wrestling like last year, and I'm just kind of trying to catch up because I love I don't know, just a different vibe that Japanese wrestling have that I'm just like, I don't know how people don't love it. I'm just like, this is amazing. And it's like done sometimes without being over the top. It's just like it's there in your face and it is what it is. So you're just like, I love it. It's one reason why I like New Japan is like my favorite because I'm just like, they're amazing and it's just great matches and not like over the top storylines all the time. It's just, it's there, So I have to check that out. Um, what would you tell somebody who wanted to get into wrestling? What would be your advice to them? What would you tell them to do if you was like someone asked you like, oh, what can I do to become a wrestler? What should I look out for? What would you tell that person?
My biggest advice would kind of just be, don't listen to naysayers. Kind of just believe in yourself. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like, if you put your mind to it, you can accomplish anything you want to. Like, you're gonna be your own worst enemy, and you should make yourself your own best friend. You know what I mean? Because you're gonna have days where you doubt yourself. You're gonna have days where you feel like you can't do it. You're gonna train and you're not gonna get something right, and you're gonna be discouraged. But just keep going, keep practicing. Stay committed, and I promise you, your dream will come true.
Nice, I like that. That's good advice. So these are my last two questions for you. The first part of the question is, what is something in your wrestling career that you haven't done yet that you want to do? And then the second part is where do you see yourself in 5 years with wrestling?
Okay. Something I've always wanted to do that I haven't been able to do yet, and it's the biggest thing is wrestle in Japan. That is kind of where, like, if I wrestle in Japan, even if it's just one time, I could retire and stop doing this happy. Because that to me was my goal and dream I have. So if I can accomplish that dream, whether it's for a big company, small company, you know what I mean? Like, as long as I get to wrestle in Japan and kill it over there, that's something I'd be super happy to do. And where do I see myself in 5 years? To be quite honest, I don't know. I feel like I don't want to say I'll be in some major company, making $1 million, but you never know. 5 years, I know this is kind of harsh, but like I could be dead. I could, maybe not be wrestling. I could be wrestling everywhere. I could be signed, but
yeah,
hopefully in 5 years, I'm making enough money in wrestling That's my biggest thing. It's making money in wrestling. You know what I mean, making money where I don't have to have you know, regular job. That I could just make money, pay bills, have a home from just
Uh-huh.
wrestling.
All right, I like those goals. That's pretty solid goals to have. So I like that. So I wanted to thank you so much for joining me. I know it's been a little crazy the last couple of weeks. We're trying to like schedule a date, but I'm so grateful that you came on and wanted to talk and chat a little bit. For the listeners, I want you guys to like check his work. I've seen him live and I think he's a fantastic wrestler. So definitely look on YouTube, check out his work. I will have all his links in the description box so you can check him out. And I will talk to you guys later. Bye, guys.
Bye.